Hello, everyone, and welcome to the March edition of Techspert Talks. I'm Troy Rainey, and I'll be your host for today's session. Today's Techspert Talk session is Embedding Qlik Analytics in SharePoint with our own Damien Villaret. Damien, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi everyone, so I'm Damien. I've been working with Qlik for 12 years now, and I'm currently working as a customer success engineer. My main focus area is Qlik Sense integration, API mashup extension, and authentication.
Great. Well, today we're going to be talking about all the prerequisites for SharePoint embedding. Damon's going to take us through what's necessary to set up in the Qlik Cloud tenant side. And then we're going to go through a demonstration using two different types of embedding, one with the JSON Web Token authentication and one using anonymous access from an anonymous access tenant. So Damien, what are we going to be embedding today?
So today we're gonna embed one of our Qlik demo app and embed this sheet into SharePoint.
All right, and where do you get the embed code? So you actually embed just the sheet.
So in order to embed this sheet, I'm gonna go here, click on the three dots, embed sheet.
Okay, there it is.
Get this link here.
Okay, I see the URL and the app ID.
So
Let's
I'm
get that.
just gonna take this up to here, copy, and keep it for later.
Okay, great. You've got a notepad collection of things you're going to need. And before we go on, what are some settings on the Qlik Cloud tenant that are important to make this embedding in SharePoint work?
First of all, we're gonna set the identity provider, so the JWT Authentication. So this is just a standard JWT configuration that we have here where we just have put the certificate.
Okay, so this tenant you've got set up, it currently uses JSON Web Token authentication. So all the users, they're authenticated through a web server. Is that right?
Yes, we are gonna place our authentication page on the web server, and that's gonna handle the authentication part. Then it's gonna redirect the page to the actual sheet that we want to see embedded into SharePoint.
Great. And I can provide a link to how to set up identity providers separately. So if people haven't set their tenant up like this, that's fine. But this is just kind of a demonstration of how this would work. All right, great. So an IDP using JSON Web Token. What else is there?
Apart from this, I also need content security policy.
Okay.
Create a new one here.
Yeah, currently we have none.
And in this case, we're gonna use the directive frame ancestor.
And this sort of just set up approval for that embedding.
Yes, so it means that you can embed the Qlik Sense app into an iframe in a third-party site.
And the third party site in this case is SharePoint. So would the origin be the SharePoint site?
Yes, which is this one. Copy this back to my console. The name can be anything. The origin though needs to be this URL that we've just copied.
Okay, so that's our SharePoint root.
Yes, I think that you need to remove the slash, but it's gonna tell you. Okay, it's removed for you.
Oh, it did it automatically. All right.
Yep.
Is there anything else here?
Now we need to create the web integration also in this web section.
All right.
Create a new web integration. As origin, I'm gonna put my web server and the SharePoint site. So both are needed in here.
Okay. And again, that web server is just an IIS web server that handles the authentication for your users on this tenant.
Yes, I'm just using a simple IIS web server to host my page.
Okay.
Where the authentication is handled. And I'm gonna put the SharePoint URL also.
Okay.
And just hit create.
And that's kind of like whitelisting those websites to allow integration with Qlik Cloud.
Yes, that's correct. So now I have that ID here that I will need later on. So I'm just gonna copy this.
Okay. Your web ID. Nice.
Now my tenant is ready to embed in SharePoint.
So we're going to be setting up some sort of authentication script that's hosted on the web server you mentioned.
Yes.
Can we take a look at that? So this is just an HTML document read by the web server and pass that authentication on, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what do we need to update here?
So we need to update here the tenant URL, the web integration ID that we have copied earlier, JWT token that is valid here.
Mm-hmm.
And we also need to update the URL of the app that we are gonna show into SharePoint once the authentication is complete.
Right. That embed code that we copied from the sheet.
Yes. So first of all, the URL of the app that we have copied earlier.
Okay.
Then update the tenant URL here.
That first part of the
This,
URL.
yes. Update the web integration ID.
Right. That was from the console under web, that ID.
Yes.
Okay. And now we're down to the JSON web token.
So we're gonna update this JSON Web Token now.
So that's a web token you've used previously. What tool do you use to update it?
The debugger on JWT.io.
And if you don't already have a token, you could fill in all those details on the right here to help encode a token.
Yes, if you don't have one, just fill in all the details, like some attributes that I've put here, and then you put your private key down there.
So what needs to be updated here?
All I need is update the date of issued at expiration and not before those three, something that is not expired.
Okay. And that's really just to sort of establish a time window when this token is valid.
Yes. I've just Googled what is the current Unix timestamp for now.
Okay.
And then for the expiration,
Okay.
so my token is now ready to use. Copy this token and put it here. So
Okay.
I now have my updated token. Save the file. I have saved it to my web server.
Before we move on to SharePoint, is there anything in IIS that's any important settings that we should be aware of?
This is just a standard installation of IIS that I'm using for this demo. The only setting I've done on this is edit the binding on the default website and add an HTTPS binding, which is best practice.
Okay. It's good to be aware. Thanks. All right. So you've updated that HTML script. We ready to embed in SharePoint?
Yes, so now we are ready to embed this page into SharePoint.
What needs to be prepared on the SharePoint side?
I'm gonna need to set up SharePoint to allow embedding external sites,
Okay. And where do we do that?
site contents, go in site settings, then go in HTML field security.
Okay.
And in here, I'm gonna add my website that is hosting the authentication page.
All right. So this is your web server that's hosting the authentication script.
Yes.
And you see it at the bottom. Great.
And also the URL of my Qlik Cloud tenant.
There they are. Okay.
And now I'm just gonna hit OK. I'm gonna create a new page just with default template.
Yeah, that's enough.
Add a title for my page, and from the toolbox on the right, choose Embed.
If you can't find it, you just search for embed.
Yes. And here, put the website that I want to embed, the URL of my
Ah,
page that is on
right.
my web server, and the iframe tags in this case,
Inside the iframe. Okay.
and just paste it in here. And we see that the preview is already coming in.
Awesome.
Then we just need to publish the page.
What I love about this embedding is that it lets you interact with the whole app just like you were in a session on the tenant.
Yes, so you can just interact with the app. It's not a static image.
Very cool. In our example today, it's really just set up for one user. How can you make it more dynamic so that it'll actually identify the user that's logged into SharePoint and pass that specific credential a different user each time to Qlik Cloud?
So in order to make that more dynamic, then we're gonna need some tools such as SPFX web part, where you can fetch the SharePoint username from your code on your web server And based on that, you would generate dynamically JSON Web Token, and then you pass that to Qlik Cloud so that you get authenticated as the correct user.
Okay. Well, that's a little more complicated and using a different tool, but it's nice to know that it's possible. And I'll provide the link to this so people can work their way through that. But how do we do it with the same type of embedding from an anonymous Qlik Cloud tenant? How would that be different?
So when you're using anonymous access, then you're just going to need your app URL and the access code in order to see the app into SharePoint. It's just anonymous. There's no notion of named users. So you can do data reduction with section access.
Right. Okay. Can you show us on your anonymous tenant what settings are important in the console?
So first of all, I need to set permissions for the user to create the link.
Okay.
So there are two ways to assign the permission. You either do it through user default and assign that permission to anyone in the tenant here, public link creation. So you can do it here and assign it to everyone in the tenant.
What would you recommend as best practice?
Instead, create a custom role and assign it to my user only. Create new.
I like that idea of creating a custom role to control permissions a little more.
Yes.
Okay. Adjusting the public link creation setting.
To allowed. And just hit confirm.
Okay.
Then I'm gonna assign this role to my user. Okay.
What other settings do we need to adjust? The web or content security policy?
Don't need the web integration in this case, but we still need the content security policy.
Okay, so we create a new content security policy like we did before.
And I need the exact same directive, which is frame ancestor.
And origin, would that be the root of your SharePoint?
Yes. Copy, paste it in here, and hit add. The next thing I need is set the right on the spaces.
So it needs to be a managed space?
Yes, that needs to be a managed space when it comes to anonymous access.
Okay.
So I'm gonna manage member and just assign the correct rights to show the link to my user.
Yeah, if you got the custom user role, what rights in the space are necessary to show that link?
This can be owner, can manage, can contribute, can view as restricted view, or can operate. You need to have one of those six to show the link.
Okay.
And now I'm gonna go to the hub.
Okay, so that's the app we're going to be embedding in the managed space.
Yes, so here my app visualization showcase,
Okay.
and we're gonna just embed the whole app this time, and we're gonna choose share.
Hmm.
Then here we have this option, anyone with the link, enable this option.
Oh, and it automatically copied it to your clipboard. That's kind of cool.
Yes. Click on this wheel, and we can see here the actual link with that access code, which is already included in the link.
Okay.
And in case you need to invalidate this code, you can just click on reset access code to generate a new one.
Yeah, it's nice to have that security feature. If for whatever reason you need to, that will make all the existing instances of the access code stop working. So what do we need to do to turn that link into the iframe script to embed?
I'm gonna need to do the same thing that I did earlier, just add those tags, the iframe sources. Here I'm gonna add this new link. So here I have the access code.
Okay. All right. So we just copy all of that and put into SharePoint.
Yes. Before I do that, since it's another tenant, I'm gonna also add this URL to the list of sites that I'm allowed to embed into SharePoint.
Right.
Go again to site contents, to site settings, HTML field security, paste my new tenant URL,
There it is.
and just hit OK. Create a new page, default template. just select the embed component, copy my iframe tag here, and just paste it in here.
Now it's magic time. Opening the app. Awesome. So that embedded the whole app.
Yes, so the code is for the whole app.
All right. And I'll share my view of that same site. There it is. Awesome. Well, that is really cool seeing it work so easily with anonymous access. And to understand how it works using user-based JSON web token authentication as well. I guess it's time for Q&A. Please submit your questions through the Q&A tool on the left-hand side of your ON24 console. I see we have some questions already, so I'll just read them from the top. First question. If we set up a dynamic solution using JSON Web Token authentication, how often will the token need to be renewed?
So usually you would generate the token every time the user wants to log in for security purposes.
Okay,
And
so that's something you would just sort of build into the script to
yes.
request a token.
Yes.
Okay, that's good to know. Next question. Does having an anonymous access tenant that's based in Sweden affect performance if our users are mostly located in USA?
I think it would affect it in some way, but how it would affect it, it would really depends on the network speed and the size of the app. But as we are mostly using apps that are already published and fairly small in size, this shouldn't be a problem.
Right, because the apps are in a managed space that we're viewing from this anonymous access tenant. Okay. That's a good question, but it's hard to say. It all depends on the size of the apps and location of users and bandwidth. But it's a pretty cool capability. All right, we'll move on to the next question. If we use the JWT option, would section access still work in the embedded visualizations?
Yes, so when you use the JWT authentication, you would actually have named users that get logged in, and you would be able to reduce the data based on section access.
Right, because since that one does authenticate each user ID, that would still work. Okay, it's good to know. But with the anonymous access, you would no longer be able to use section access, so maybe you have to limit the app a different way. Okay.
Yes.
Next question. Are those embed codes from the app tenant part of Qlik Embed, or is that a separate API? A follow-up to that was, can you explain what Qlik Embed is?
So the embed code, well, it's actually the same thing as the access code that we have actually used earlier for the anonymous access.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use that also with Qlik Embed. Qlik Embed is a framework that is used to embed Qlik visualization in a third-party site. So it's a more modern approach than what we had previously with capability APIs and enabler.js.
Okay.
You can see the advantages that it has on Qlik.dev. So here you have why you should use Qlik Embed and what are the advantages that it has over our oldest technologies such as the Capability API or Enabler.js.
Oh, very cool. I'll be sure to include this link as well. Great. Next question. Are Java Web Token or anonymous authentication the only two options that work with SharePoint? What about Windows authentication?
We don't have Windows authentication in Qlik Cloud. We have other type of interactive authentication, which are OpenID Connect and SAML, but
Hmm.
those one require the redirection to the identity provider to complete the authentication flow, which SharePoint will actually block when it's instructed to redirect from inside the embedded page. So that's why we can't use those, and we have to use either JWT or anonymous authentication.
Okay. Well, it's good to understand exactly why, that it's SharePoint that's blocking that. Okay. Next question. How would this be different if using Qlik Sense Enterprise instead of Qlik Cloud?
So if you were to use Qlik Sense Enterprise, the basic principle is actually pretty similar. So you would have to set up virtual proxy and all the things around that to actually embed into SharePoint. You have a bit more option when it comes to the authentication part, which you have ticket, you have header, and then you have JWT and Anonymous also.
Okay. Well, it's nice to know there are a little more options, but it's pretty much the same principle.
You have this article which explains what you need to set up to use iframe and mashup and Qlik Sense for Windows, and then it would be the same principle that you would put that URL in the embed component in SharePoint.
Beautiful. I'll include that link as well. Great. Next question. How much is an anonymous access tenant?
So I don't have the pricing here, but you should contact your account executive to find the pricing for your country.
Very good. Next question. Does Qlik offer any services to set up the dynamic JWT solution you mentioned?
Yes, so if you need help with that, you can contact Qlik Professional Services for the implementation.
Great. And I think we have an article on how to reach out to professional services in your region, so I'll try and include that link. Next question. Is it possible to publish apps from a normal tenant to the managed space of an anonymous access tenant?
So if you do that manually, you would need to export the app from the normal tenant and then import it in the Anonymous tenant before you would be able to publish it to the managed space. If you want to automate that, you can automate this process with API or with Qlik CLI or with Qlik Application Automation.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen a demonstration of that with application automation, that there's a way to build up a workflow so that it will actually publish from one tenant to another, but there is a bit to set up there, but it's certainly possible. Very cool. Last question we have time for today. I tried setting this up using an anonymous tenant, but in SharePoint, I just get a sad face login.qlik.com refuse to connect error. Any ideas how to troubleshoot this?
So in this case, you could use the browser dev tools to see what error is returned. So just go to more tools and use developer tools. You can troubleshoot if you're getting any error. SharePoint is pretty verbose, but when it comes to that sad face, usually the content security policy hasn't been set correctly. Or in the case of anonymous tenant, if the access code is incorrect, then it would also try to redirect you to a logging page, which will give you the sad face.
Okay, great. Well, Damien, thank you so much for putting this demo together and showing us how to embed Qlik Cloud apps into SharePoint. I think this will be very helpful for people, especially learning what's possible using that web parts tool to make JSON web token solution a little more dynamic and seeing what it looks like from an anonymous access tenant as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you everyone for attending. If you have any further questions, just reach out to us on Qlik Community.
Great. Thank you, everyone. We hope you enjoyed this session. And special thank you to Damien. We always appreciate getting experts like Damien to share with us. Here's our legal disclaimer. And thank you once again. Have a great rest of your day.